Proof was sitting in his email draft folder. Unsent. Maybe he forgot to send it. Maybe some part of him wanted her to find it. Jessica stood in the doorway of his study, her birthday dress still zipped at the back, one heel already kicked off. His phone, hers had died at dinner. She'd grabbed his off the counter without thinking, glowing in her hand. She read it twice. Her thumb hovered over the screen like she could rewind the last 30 seconds of her life if she pressed hard enough. She didn't gasp. She set the phone face up on his desk, screen still lit, and smoothed the front of her dress the way she used to before walking into rooms full of people who loved her. Hayan found her like that. Still in her makeup, her hair pinned the way he liked it, her hands perfectly steady. "Not dressed yet," he said. "Reservations at 8. I saw the email. I didn't ask which one." That was the part that cracked something loose in her chest, not the words on the screen, but the half-second where his face forgot to lie. Jessica. Dunt. She picked up her purse. Her hands didn't shake, not yet, that would come later, in a car, in a city she hadn't chosen yet, gripping the wheel until her knuckles ached. "It's not what you thunk," I said. "Don't." I took a step toward her, and the gap between them, 3 feet of bedroom carpet, suddenly felt like a wall he'd built brick by brick without ever telling her he was building it. "Where you going?" "To get our daughter." "To me, please. I gave you 6 years of talking to me." Her voice never climbed. That was the worst part, no scream, no shattering glass, just a closing door dressed up as a sentence. "Tonight you don't get to start." She walked out past him, close enough that her shoulder brushed his arm, and he didn't reach for her. Later he'd tell himself it was respect, giving her room to breathe. The truth was simpler. He froze. A man who controlled half the shipping ports in this country stood paralyzed in his own bedroom doorway and watched the back of his wife's dress disappear down the hallway he'd walked 1,000 times and would never walk the same way again. By midnight, she had their daughter buckled into a car that wasn't hers, borrowed from a friend who knew better than to ask questions. One suitcase in the trunk packed by hands that moved faster than her mind could keep up with. She didn't check the rearview mirror. She'd promised herself that much, and for once that whole terrible year, she kept a promise to herself before keeping one to anyone else. Bjussin smelled like salt and diesel and grilled mackerel from the street carts, nothing like the cedar and money hush of the house she'd left behind. Nobody here knew her as anybody's wife. That turned out to be the only mercy available to her that year. "You want to register a what?" the clerk asked, not unkind, just worn down by a Tuesday that had clearly already gone long. "A logistics company, small freight coordination. I have contacts from before." Clerk's eyes flicked from Jessica's daughter, asleep against her hip, thumb in her mouth, to Jessica's shoes, the only nice thing left from her old life, scuffed now at the toe. "Statun kaput." Jessica named a number that made the clerk's pen stop moving. "That won't get you far in this market." "Got me out of where I was," Jessica said. "I'll make it carry me the rest of the way." She wasn't performing courage for the clerk's benefit. She didn't have the energy to perform anything for anyone that year. She was simply telling the truth and hoping it would eventually catch up to being true. The first 6 months nearly broke her, and it wasn't the work that did the damage. The work she could do, she'd spent years standing close enough to logistics and shipping to absorb more than anyone, including her, had given her credit for. What nearly broke her was the quiet that settled in after her daughter fell asleep each night. The broth smell of the noodle shop below seeping up through the floorboards of the one-room office that doubled as their apartment. Her daughter's portable crib wedged between a filing cabinet and the window. She called shipping contacts at 2 in the morning Korea time to catch them at a reasonable hour somewhere else on the planet. Her voice pitched low so it wouldn't wake the baby. "Thus is Jessica Kulawa, calling regarding container space on the Bjussin, Long Beach Rutta." Cluck. She rubbed her thumb hard against the pad of her index finger, an old nervous habit from childhood she thought she'd outgrown, and dialed again. "Understand you don't know me, but I can guarantee turnaround that." Cluck. 41 calls, 41 clicks, each one landing somewhere behind her sternum like a small stone dropped into still water. On the 42nd, a man with a gravel voice and zero patience for nonsense said, "You sound like you actually know what you're talking about. Most people calling at this hour don't." That was the first contract. Embarrassingly small. She hung up the phone and pressed both palms flat against her eyes, not quite crying, something closer to the body finally exhaling after holding its breath for half a year. Her daughter stirred. Jessica crossed the room and sat on the floor beside the crib, knees pulled to her chest, and whispered the only thing she had left in her. "We're going to be okay. I don't know how yet, but we are." She didn't fully believe it. She said it anyway, the way you set a table for guests you're not sure are coming, because the alternative is eating alone standing up. Seoul looked exactly the same. Haein did not feel the same standing in it. Penthouse sat untouched, half the closet empty, the silence wearing a Jessica-shaped hole into every room he passed through. He'd started leaving lights on in rooms he wasn't using, just to make the place sound less like an apartment and more like somewhere people still lived. "You haven't eaten," Minjun said, setting a folder on the desk Haein hadn't looked up from in an hour, the ice in his untouched whiskey long since melted into a thin amber ring. "Eaten. You look like a man at his own funeral." Ha-in turned the folder over without opening it. "Send something for her birthday. Through the lawyer. Don't say it's from me directly, just... You sent something last year. It came back unopened." Send it anyway. Munjun studied him a beat too long, then left without another word. Haein sat with the unopened folder and the city lights doing nothing to shrink a room that had somehow grown larger in her absence. Across that same skyline, in a private room thick with the smell of good whiskey and the particular silence of men who'd long since stopped needing to raise their voices to be obeyed, Director Sus sat with two associates. "Has distracted," one of them said. 6 years and he's still distracted. "Has controllable," Director Sus said, turning his glass slowly by the stem. "That's the only metric that matters. The test worked precisely as designed. She's gone. He's compliant. The organization is safer for it." "If she Rusafusas," Director Sus smiled, the particular smile of a man who believed he'd accounted for every outcome but one. "She won't," he said. "Women like her don't come back from public humiliation. She'll build some small, forgettable life somewhere and we'll never hear the name again." I had no idea how wrong he was. Neither did Haein, not for years yet. The lie built to protect the organization from Jessica's leverage over him had succeeded in exactly one direction and failed in every other. It had cost Haein the only thing it was supposedly designed to protect. 3 years in, Kalawa Logistics had 11 employees, real windows that opened onto the harbor, and a conference table Jessica had refinished herself over one long weekend because she didn't yet trust herself to spend money she hadn't personally bled for. "Doing the thing again," Yijin said from the doorway, arms crossed, a stack of shipping manifests under one elbow. "What thing?" "Chucking the manila numbers a third time when I already checked them twice. I like to know things for myself. I like to control things for yourself. There's a difference, and one of them is going to give you an ulcer by 40. Yijin set the manifests down. "They signed, by the way. You want to know what they said about ya?" "Not particularly." "They said you negotiate like someone who's been burned before and isn't planning on letting it happen twice." Jessica closed her laptop. Outside the window, a container ship's horn sounded low and long across the harbor, the sound she'd come to associate with money finally moving in the right direction. "Get me the Q3 freight projections." Yejun let it go, the way she always eventually did. Everyone who worked for Jessica learned within the first month not to ask about before. You learned it the same way you learned not to touch a stove that had already burned you once, by watching her face go somewhere distant and cold whenever the subject got too close. That night, after the office emptied out, her daughter sat at the conference table doing homework, 7 years old and sharper than Jessica was ready for. "Mom, do I have a dad?" The pen in Jessica's hand stopped moving mid-signature. "Everybody has a dad, baby. That's not what I asked." Jessica set the pen down slowly, giving her hands something deliberate to do instead of reaching for her daughter the way every instinct told her to. "He's in Korea," she said. "We don't see him." "Not, it's complicated." That's what grown-ups say when they don't want to explain something. Jessica looked at her daughter, really looked, which she didn't always let herself do, because looking too long meant seeing Haein's eyes looking back at her from a face that was supposed to be only hers. "Right," she said. "It is. I'll tell you the truth one day. I promise. Just not tonight." Her daughter accepted it with the quiet grace of a child who'd learned early how to read the weather in a room and went back to her homework. Jessica sat very still, the promise settling over her shoulders heavier than she expected, not yet knowing the truth she owed her daughter wasn't even the truth she herself possessed. Year 5, the empire stopped being a small story. Callaway Logistics swallowed 2 regional competitors, broke into 3 new ports, and landed the cover of a trade publication with a headline Jessica hated and Yi-jin loved. The woman who built an empire from a borrowed car. "It makes it sound like a fairy tale," Jessica said, tossing the magazine onto her desk. "It is a fairy tale. You just keep forgetting you're the one who built the castle." Jessica didn't answer. A contract proposal had landed on her desk that morning, a partnership at a scale that would push Callaway Logistics from regional powerhouse into something genuinely international. The partnering company's name meant nothing to her. The parent holding company 3 layers behind it would have meant everything if she'd dug deeper before greenlighting the meeting. She hadn't needed to. She trusted her instincts and Yi-jin's due diligence, and neither of them connected a 6-year-old surname from a life Jessica never discussed to a contract sitting innocently on a Tuesday desk. She signed off on scheduling it. Neither of them had any idea who was about to walk through that door. Hayen stood outside the glass doors of Callaway Logistics for nearly 4 full minutes before going in, the lobby smelling of cedar and fresh-cut flowers. His reflection doubled in the polished floor. "Read the directory 3 times, Minjun said, making sure we're on the right floor. We're on the right floor the first time." Elevator opened on the executive level, and Hayen saw the red hair before anything else across the room, turned away, laughing at something her operations manager said. The laugh died the instant she turned and saw him, the sound cut off clean as a wire snipped mid-current. Jessica. Her face didn't crack. That terrified him more than tears would have. The Jessica he remembered would have shown something. This Jessica looked at him the way she might look at a clause she didn't like buried in fine print. "Mr. Cho," she said, using the formal surname he hadn't heard from her lips in years. "You're early. This is your company." "It is." "Shall we sit?" She gestured to the conference table like he was any other executive, not the man whose silence had rearranged the entire architecture of her life. Hayen had negotiated with men who wanted him dead and never once felt less in command of a room. "Your terms are aggressive," he said, eyes on the contract instead of her face, because her face was doing something to his composure he couldn't afford to examine in front of witnesses. "My terms are fair. If your organization can't meet fair terms, there are other partners in the region happy to take this deal." "There aren't, not at our volume." "Then I suppose you'll be signing as written." Yi-jin, sensing whether she didn't understand, found a reason to step out. The door clicked shut behind her and the silence that followed had teeth in it. "You look well," Hayen said. "Don't." "Jessica, we're discussing a shipping contract. That's what's on this table. It's not the only thing in this room." She looked up at him fully then, and for one unguarded second he caught it, not love, not anymore, but the ghost of where love used to live before silence starved it out. "You don't get to walk in here after 6 years, she said, "and decide what's on the table. I let you leave because I thought it was what you wanted. You didn't let me do anything. I left." Her hands stayed flat on the table, steady as stone. "There's a difference, and if you still don't understand it, I don't know what to tell you." "There's something you don't know," he said, the words coming out faster than he intended, like he'd been holding them so long they'd built up pressure. "About that night, about the email." Jessica went very still, the particular stillness of someone whose pulse had just spiked even though nothing on her face moved. "I'm not interested in excuses." "It's not an excuse." His voice cracked, the first real crack she'd heard from him in 6 years. "It's the truth. I should have told you 6 years ago. That's the part I can't undo, not the lie itself, the silence after it." She didn't answer right away. The woman who'd left Seoul 6 years ago would have demanded the truth on the spot, desperate for anything to make sense of the wreckage. The woman sitting across from him now had built an empire on the foundation of not needing anyone's explanations to keep moving forward. "Have a meeting in 20 minutes, she said, standing, smoothing her blazer in a gesture that echoed, neither of them registered it consciously, the way she'd smoothed her dress the night she found the email. "Sign the contract or don't, Mr. Cho." She didn't run. She'd promised herself years ago she'd never run from him again. She would simply leave on her own schedule, when she decided a conversation had reached its end. This one had. Hayen sat alone at the table, the unsigned contract in front of him, the truth he'd carried for 6 years still hanging unfinished in the air between them, and understood, too late, the way he understood most things where she was concerned, that he'd just lost the one piece of leverage he had left. She already suspected something didn't add up. He'd seen the flicker behind her eyes when he said it's not an excuse. She wasn't going to chase the truth down. She was going to make him earn the right to hand it to her. The contract got signed through lawyers, quietly, the way Jessica preferred. 3 weeks later, Yi-jin appeared in her doorway holding a calendar invite that made Jessica's jaw tighten before she'd even read it. Quarterly operations review. Both companies in person. Standard for a contract this size. Reschedule it. Tried. Their side says their principal attends in person, no exceptions, trust building after a deal this large. Yi-jin paused, watching Jessica's face. You've been strange about this account since it landed. Is there a problem? There's no problem. Jessica. It's fine. Yi-jin lingered a half-second longer than necessary, the way people do when deciding whether loyalty means staying quiet or saying the uncomfortable thing. Whatever it is, she said finally, you've survived worse than a meeting. She left before Jessica could answer. Good, because Jessica didn't have one. She'd survived worse, sure. But she hadn't survived 6 years without occasionally, in the dark, wondering what she would have done if he'd told her the truth that night instead of nothing at all. Her daughter found the gift box first, the 6th one, sitting in the closet among its 5 unopened siblings like a row of small locked doors. Mom, what's this? Jessica's stomach dropped. Put that back, baby. Has my name on it. Whose is it? There was no version of this conversation Jessica had ever fully rehearsed, despite promising herself for years she would. It's from your father. Her daughter's hands stilled on the box, 13 now, sharp enough to do the math on 6 birthdays and 1 untouched drawer. You never let me open them. I know. Why? Jessica sat on the edge of the bed and patted the space beside her. Her daughter sat, box still balanced in her lap, waiting with a patience that had nothing childlike about it. Your father and I didn't end things the way 2 people who loved each other should end things, Jessica said. I found something that broke my trust completely. I left, and I took you with me. Because I didn't know any other way to protect both of us at once. What did he do? I thought I knew. For 6 years, I thought I knew exactly what he did. Jessica's voice wavered, the first time her daughter had heard it do that in longer than she could remember. A few weeks ago, he told me there might be more to it, that he's been carrying something he never said out loud. Do you believe him? I don't know yet. Her daughter looked down at the box, 6 years compressed into a single careful gesture, repeated annually, rooted through a lawyer who said almost nothing else. I open it, just this one. I'm not asking you to forgive him. I want to know what's inside. Jessica looked at her daughter, fierce, already so entirely her own person, and felt something clenched in her chest loosen by 1 notch. Okay, she said. Just this one. Inside wasn't jewelry, wasn't money. A small hand-bound book of photographs Jessica didn't know existed, captions in Hayen's handwriting beneath each one. The last page held a letter, dated the night Jessica walked out, addressed to a daughter who couldn't read yet. I don't know if your mother will ever let you see this. I don't know if I'll get the chance to explain myself to either of you. But I need you to know the silence wasn't because I didn't love you both enough to fight. It was because I thought silence was the only way to keep you safe from a world I should never have let touch your lives at all. I was wrong. I'm sorry I was wrong too late to matter. Jessica read it twice, and felt 6 years of carefully maintained certainty cracks straight down the middle. The quarterly review happened in a smaller room, fewer people, more required honesty, operations, reports sitting between them, neither principal fully reading a single line. Letter, Jessica said before he could open with freight numbers. My daughter read it. In's pen stopped against the page. I didn't know if it would ever reach her. Almost didn't. 6 years of unopened boxes. His first name, unguarded, no surname left to hide behind. Tell me, all of it, not the version that makes you sound like a victim of your own organization. So he told her, the elder's test, manufactured correspondence planted exactly where she'd find it, timed for the 1 night a year she was guaranteed to be looking through love instead of suspicion. Not a test of his loyalty to her. A test of whether she was a liability the organization could exploit, a weakness rival families could use against him if it ever came to that. They wanted to know if losing you would break me, he said. I made the wrong choice. I thought if you believed I'd betrayed you, you'd disappear from their radar entirely. Hate me, forget me, live safely. You decided that for me. Her voice stayed quiet, and the quiet was worse than volume could ever be. You took the single worst night of my life and let me carry it for 6 years alone because you decided I couldn't be trusted with my own choice. I decided I couldn't watch them use you against me. That's not protection, Hayen. That's you protecting yourself from having to watch me choose. He had no answer. There wasn't one. She was right, and the worst part was watching him understand it in real time, the realization landing on his face like something physically heavy settling into his shoulders. I built an entire company, Jessica said. An entire life. Raised our daughter alone in a country where I knew nobody because of a lie your own people manufactured to test whether I was disposable. And you let me believe it was real because the truth was harder than watching me leave. It again, he said. I let you believe a lie because I thought it would put you in less danger than the truth. I was wrong for 6 years. I don't have anything that fixes it. I only have the truth, finally, 6 years too late. She didn't answer him that day, and for the first time since walking out of that house, she let herself sit with not knowing instead of needing to resolve it on the spot. A week later, Hayen stood in front of the full council of elders for the first time in his life and did something none of them expected. I'm restructuring the Osaka shipping division, he said. Full financial transparency, third-party audit, starting next quarter. Every account, every route, open to regulatory review. Room went still in the particular way rooms go still when men realize money is about to start moving somewhere they can't follow it. That division has run quietly for 15 years, one elder said. Why touch it now? Because it's the division director Sa uses to fund operations this council was never told about. Hayen didn't look at Director Sa when he said it, which somehow made it land harder. I'm not asking permission. I'm informing the council before the auditors arrive Monday. Cost him immediately and visibly. 2 elders who'd backed him for a decade went cold in the room. An alliance he'd spent years building gone in under a minute. No guarantee Jessica would ever know he'd done it. No leverage gained from it at all. He did it anyway, before he needed anything from her, before any war had been declared, because it was the first time in 6 years he'd chosen to lose something on purpose instead of by accident. Director Sa said nothing in the room. He didn't need to. The look he gave Hayen on the way out said everything the room hadn't. The retaliation came faster than even Hayen expected. He found Director Sa waiting in his own office 2 days later, sitting in his chair like he'd never left it, like the chair still belonged to him by some older claim. Made an enemy of the only man in this organization who let you keep your wife's name off a kill list 6 years ago, Director Sa said, not rising. Did you think gratitude was optional? I think you tested my family to see if you could control me through her, and it worked for 6 years. It doesn't work anymore. It worked because it was correct. You nearly burned this entire organization down for one woman. I saved you from yourself. Director Sa stood now, slow, unhurried, a man who'd never once needed to move quickly to win a room. And you've repaid that by handing her the keys to every shipping route we own. She already had the keys. You just never noticed because you assumed she'd disappear. Something flickered across Director Sa's face, the first crack Hayen had ever seen there. Callaway Logistics will not survive the next 60 days. Regulatory pressure in 3 jurisdictions, simultaneously, untraceable to us. You can watch it happen, or you can resign your position now and I'll consider leaving the company alone as a courtesy. That's not a threat. That's a confession. Hayen kept his voice level, the way he'd watched Jessica keep hers level in a boardroom months earlier. You just told me out loud in my own office that you're planning to attack a legitimate company using organizational resources without council authorization. I have that on recording, Director. Director Sa's expression didn't move, but something behind his eyes recalculated fast. Bluffing. Check your own jacket pocket. The pen you've been holding since you sat down isn't yours. It's mine. Hayen held his gaze. I learned that particular trick 6 years too late from someone who's much better at this than either of us. The first time in the conversation, Director Sa said nothing at all. He called Jessica from the elevator before the doors had even closed behind him. Going to come after your company, he said, no preamble. Director Sa confirmed it himself on a recording I now have. Regulatory pressure, 3 jurisdictions designed to look like bad luck. It won't be. Pause on the line, Jessica processing fast and controlled the way she processed everything now. Why tell me? Because 6 years ago I let you walk into the dark with no warning. I'm not doing that twice. And because I already cost myself 2 allies on this council telling them the truth about him before I needed anything from you. This isn't a trade, Jessica. I'd have done it either way. A longer pause this time. Come to my office, she said. Tonight. Bring the recording and everything else you have on his operation. If they're declaring war on my company, I want to know exactly who I'm fighting before they land the first real hit. He arrived past 9. The building emptied out, just Jessica behind her desk under low light, a focus on her face he hadn't seen since the early days of watching her run a household the way she ran everything, completely, without half measures. "Sit," she said, not unkind, direct. He laid out names, accounts, the recording, the shipping fronts the organization used to launder pressure into legitimate-looking business disputes. Jessica listened without interrupting. Taking notes in a shorthand he didn't recognize, 6 years of her own evolution he hadn't been present to witness. "You told the council about the Osaka division before any of this started," she said, setting down her pen. "Yi-Jin flagged the regulatory filing this afternoon. That wasn't because of me." "Then why?" "Because I spent 6 years deciding things for you that weren't mine to decide. I wanted to do one thing that cost me something before I asked you to trust me with anything else." Jessica studied him a long moment, not soft, not yet, but recalculating. "That's the first thing you've done," she said, instead of just said. "They're a difference. An apology asks me to feel better about what already happened. An action means you do something different now, whether or not I ever find out." She held his eyes. "This was the second kind. Here's what happens," she said, business returning, though something underneath it had shifted by a measurable degree. "We fight this together. Not because I'm forgiving you, because I built this company alone and I'm not handing it to men who manufacture loyalty tests for sport. You have information I need, and now I believe you'll actually use it honestly. Understood. When this is over, win or lose, we're going to talk about our daughter without a lawyer or an unopened box standing between us. You've already started earning that conversation. Don't stop." "I won't." What followed wasn't fought with violence. It was fought the way Jessica had built everything, methodically, relentlessly, with a precision Director Sun never accounted for because his test had been engineered to produce exactly one kind of woman. The kind who vanishes. She didn't vanish. She countersued before the regulatory pressure could fully land. She moved capital through channels Hayen's intelligence mapped for her, 3 steps ahead of every play director Su's organization attempted. She turned the financial transparency Callaway Logistics had built its name on into a weapon. Every quiet attempt to discredit her instead exposed the irregularities inside the organization trying to take her down. Irregularities that now had a recording attached to them with Director Su's own voice on it. The council convened without him present. 6 weeks after that office confrontation, Director Su resigned under pressure that had nothing left to do with persuasion and everything to do with evidence. His own elders unwilling to protect a man who'd confessed to unauthorized operations on tape. Hayen, for the first time in his adult life, stood at the head of an organization with no one above him second-guessing his choices. His first choice was walking back into Jessica's office, unannounced, no contract between them this time. "It's done," he said. "He's gone." "I know, I had people watching." Of course she did. He almost smiled. The woman who'd once stood frozen in his bedroom doorway now ran an intelligence operation parallel to his own without breaking a sweat. "What happens now?" Jessica looked at him a long moment, weighing 6 years of silence against 6 weeks of finally choosing to stand beside her instead of deciding for her, and one decision made before she ever knew about it that had cost him something with no guarantee of return. "Now you have dinner with your daughter, this Saturday. No lawyer, no box, just you showing up the way you should have been showing up for years." "Us?" "There is no us yet, Hayen." Steady, not cold, the particular steadiness of someone telling the truth instead of managing a moment. "There's a man who finally chose honesty 6 years too late, and a woman who built an entire life proving she didn't need him to survive it. Whatever comes next, it won't look like what we had before. I'm not going back to who I was." "I don't want you to go back. I want to know who you became." Jessica studied him, really studied him, for the first time since he'd walked through her office doors months earlier. "Then earn it," she said. "Slowly, the way I built everything else." Saturday came. Hayen arrived 15 minutes early, sat at a table set for 3, and waited with his hands folded the way he hadn't waited for anything in 6 years. His daughter walked in first, Jessica a step behind her, red hair catching the evening light through the restaurant windows the way it always had, the way he'd missed without letting himself admit how much. His daughter sat across from him, studying his face the way 13-year-olds study things they're still deciding whether to trust. "You came," she said. "I came. Says you're going to keep coming. Not just once." "I am." "We'll see," she said, and there was so much of Jessica folded into that single skeptical phrase that something cracked open in Hayen's chest. equal parts grief for the years he'd lost, and something cautious that felt, against all his instincts, like hope. Jessica sat beside their daughter, not beside him, small distance, deliberate, exactly as much as she was ready to close and not 1 inch more. It told him everything about where they actually stood, not forgiveness. Not yet. A door, finally, standing open instead of locked. "So," Jessica said, picking up the menu, her eyes meeting his a beat longer than business ever required. "Let's see if you can actually keep a promise this time." She didn't go back to who she was. She never would. She'd built something better out of the wreckage he left behind, and for the first time he was the one trying to catch up, one Saturday, one earned conversation, one open door at a time.